possibly the most famous or infamous mugshot of all time. Last Thursday, Donald Trump surrendered himself to Fulton County Jail in Georgia after he was charged with 13 felony counts for trying to overturn the 2020 election in the Peach State, after 18 co-defendants, including former New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani, turned themselves in as well. The charges include racketeering, solicitation of violation of oath by a public officer, and falsifying documents. This is the fourth indictment for Trump, after charges for hush money payments to porn star Stormy Daniels, the retention of classified documents in his Mar-a-Lago home, and a federal indictment for his attempts to overturn the 2020 election. Just like the previous three, Trump has denied all charges, saying he did nothing wrong and doubling down on his claims of election fraud. But whilst the charges are piling on the former president, it is causing no harm to his presidential campaign. On the contrary, his indictments have helped his polling numbers, utilising his base on the claims of being targeted by the establishment. His polling lead among Republicans is so strong, averaging around 50% over the last month, that he felt no need to join his fellow Republican candidates for the first national debate. But whilst Republicans are backing him, will the wider public follow through? Is Trump being unfairly targeted by people who want to see him fail? Will Trump be able to successfully run a presidential campaign with an unprecedented number of criminal proceedings against him? And if so, how does this reflect on American politics? What's next for Donald Trump?
All right, let's get to it. What is next for Donald Trump? Lady, gentlemen, as always, we begin with a quick fire round, 30 seconds each to lay out your initial stance on the matter, and we'll pick it up from there. Corinne Clark, please take the lead. Your 30 seconds are on.
Well, I think we're seeing once again the mainstream media is really hoping that this is the final nail in the Trump coffin. They've been saying that for the last 7 years. And we're seeing the exact opposite from the American public. The campaign is more energized than ever. I think more Americans who would never even be participating in a primary are now interested in this Republican primary, and Trump will come out on top for this.
All right, Yigal Marcus, your thoughts?
I disagree. When we look at the polls in the wake of the debate this past week, what we're beginning to see is more Americans being willing to listen and consider other candidates. And yes, Mr. Trump has 50% of the vote pretty consistently. What he doesn't have is the other 50%. And so I think as this continues and as his problems mount, which, by the way, are definitely prosecutions and definitely discriminatory, but nevertheless, Americans want to get past it. They want to look at a bright new future, and they're hearing that from the other candidates.
All right, last but not least, Marc Schulman.
Look, I think within the Republicans, it just helps him. His base thinks he's some sort of combination of Superman on one hand and Joan d'Arc on the other. I don't know which one, how it ends up. But the reality is his base still loves him. I think, look, it's certainly going to hurt him in the general. And the Republican Party as a whole, after he goes into trial again and again and again, and at some point some of them he may end up in convictions, they might decide, wait, this doesn't work. And we also have other possibilities, of course, the issue of whether constitutionally he can run. So we'll have to see.
All right, and let's please feel free to engage in a conversation from this point onwards. And I do want to begin with the latest news in today. The trial date, March 4th, 2024. Good or bad for the Trump campaign? Mark?
I think it's a problem for the Trump campaign. Again, it's in the middle of everything. He's going to go from trial to trial to trial. As much as people are going to say, oh, he's being persecuted, and we can argue whether he's being persecuted or not, the idea that a presidential candidate keeps on having to appear in court all of the time, and we'll hear a lot of the testimony, and of course, when the Atlanta trial comes, it'll be televised, and people will see that maybe what he did may not have been quite so good. 63% of the American people believe he committed crimes. So at some point, maybe there'll be enough opposition within the Republican Party to float a significant other candidate. It really is a question of timing and how that works out. But it's really tough to run a campaign in the midst of all of these trials, not to mention the cost of his lawyers. I mean, the money he should be spending on advertising and other things in his campaign, he's going to be spending on lawyers. So we'll have to see.
Well, mugshot merchandise are said to be helping in this respect. Corinne Clark, is Trump's demeanor his weakness or his strength?
I think his demeanor for everything he's facing is absolutely the only option he has, which is to oppose it, to be defiant, to continue to fight. If he wants to maintain his candidacy for president, he has to continue to fight. But everything that Marc mentions is like, oh gosh, well, we can't have a candidate who is strung up in court, who's wasting money on legal fees. That's exactly why they are doing this to Trump. They are hoping that they can drain him of the resources necessary for him to run a successful presidential campaign. So far, we have not seen that happen. The presidential campaign is more successful than any other Republican nominee's campaign or Republican candidate's campaign. But that is exactly why they are doing this. They are hoping that they can weaken the Trump machine. So far, they haven't had luck, and I don't think that they are going to do it.
And that is perhaps something we might elaborate on a bit further, Marc. The chicken or the egg embroiled in legal challenges in order to nullify the claim that he cannot hold a campaign while doing it. Yes or no? Well, before we get to that, post-debate, Yigal Marcus, can any GOP candidate really eat away at Trump's support without being eaten by him, as in not being seen at least as trying to bring him down?
I think it depends on how many candidates are going to be left, early on. I think that if you still have 12 candidates or 8 candidates on the ticket, there's, it's a clear path for former President Trump. But I think if candidates clear the road, and really, it wouldn't surprise me if DeSantis and Haley came together and said, look, for the better of our country, we're going to do a joint ticket. We're going to announce it early. And so now we've got a legitimate alternate option to President Trump. A DeSantis-Haley ticket versus Trump. Trump's getting 50%, cleared path for the other 50%. I think it can make it very interesting.
Corinne, what do you think of such a potential move?
I don't see it happening, especially after the debate. I think the only poll that shows a bump for DeSantis after the debate was paid for by the DeSantis campaign. I think a lot of us watched it and thought, who is that guy? That is not the guy that participated in the 2018 debates, that's for sure. And I think the energy is not behind him. Actually, basically everybody else had a better performance than the number 2 candidate, which is Ron DeSantis. And that's why we're seeing people like Vivek gain support while DeSantis is staying exactly where he is.
Corinne, you're getting nervous. You're getting nervous. I hear it in your voice. You're getting very nervous. He was by far the best candidate there. He was the most presidential candidate there. And finally, it took him forever to get there, unfortunately. But really he certainly rose above the others in terms of his preparation, his track record, what he was able to accomplish in Florida. And when you take Nikki Haley, who was standing not far from him, and her—
I will take Nikki Haley any moment over DeSantis.
And also executive experience. It should make you guys nervous.
If Nikki Haley runs, I might even vote for her, but not DeSantis. But the reality is,
there we go.
The narcissism of politicians is quite amazing. The fact that Trump refuses to step aside, the same way we have the same problem here in Israel, the same way Biden refuses to step aside. People who are too old to be presidents and prime ministers absolutely refuse to step aside and keep on running. A man under indictment, multiple trials, in any other place in the world, any other time. I mean, think the Founding Fathers. Can you imagine the Founding Fathers thinking of the fact that someone is running for president who's been indicted 4 times? I mean, the absurdity of it.
Funny. The Founding Fathers absolutely considered the fact that a presidential candidate may run and be indicted. That is why it's not illegal for someone.
No, they didn't think it was possible. They didn't think it. They couldn't imagine the amount of. No, excuse me. The idea the Founding Fathers could have thought that someone was indicted would run for president. You can't even think of that. The Founding Fathers believed in honesty. Believed the word was a word. They didn't believe in selling lies. The Founding Fathers are turning in their graves thinking this is where we've gotten to in American politics. I mean,
yes,
please.
I'm positive that a ton of revolutionaries who overthrew the biggest empire in the world could not imagine a political persecution. You're right. They could have never imagined political persecution.
They couldn't imagine someone like Trump being president. That's why they created the Electoral College, to stop someone like Trump being president. That's the reality. They understood that they were afraid of populism, and so they created an Electoral College to be a break. We got rid of the Electoral College as a break, so he became president. But they understood the fear of populism. They understood the fear of someone who was not competent being elected. They understood all of that, and they didn't believe in that. They believed in competent people.
Here's the problem, Marc. Here's the problem with your argument. Voters, democracy. The reality is voters elected him, and in the last election, whether you like him or not, and I'm not, as you know, an apologetic Trump supporter, but he attracted a lot of voters. And voters have a voice in America. At least they used to.
Absolutely, they have a voice. I understand that. I'm just talking about the founding fathers who didn't believe the voters should have such a voice, if you remember correctly.
Well, the founding fathers wouldn't believe that presidential candidates are making funny dances on short videos for rallying support, I suspect. But Marc alluded to it earlier. The GOP race is won. Question being, Yigal Marcus, if Donald Trump can, keep the momentum all the way to the White House.
Absolutely, he can. Will it work? Remains to be seen. But the reality, I think, is that he is milking this for what he can. I mean, it's to raise $7.1 million for a mugshot is actually very impressive. It's actually a very impressive business feat. But the reality is that I think Americans are going to tire of this over long periods of time. We're in September now. The first trial is in March, which means 7 more months of reminders of all these of weaponized DOJ, but also the laws that he could have very well have broken. Yeah. And so I think at some point voters begin to tire. They want and are desperate for a better future, for a positive vision of America. And when they begin to hear more and more of that from, less and less candidates, I think you're going to see people change. I think we're beginning to see that now after the first debate. People listened and liked what they saw last week.
The GOP is going to have to answer a simple question. Trump lost in 2020. Will all of these indictments likely to take someone who voted for Biden to vote for Trump next time? I don't think so. And so the reality is if they want to win next time, they need to have somebody else who's going to take on Biden, or if Biden at some point steps down, someone else, because Trump will not succeed again. He lost the popular vote twice in a row. He lost the electoral vote this past time. His indictments cannot possibly help him in the general election. It'll help him in the primaries. I grant you that. And he may be a locomotive that can't be stopped. But in the general election, this is going to be an anchor around his feet.
Except
Corinne,
except when Americans hear more and more about a weaponized DOJ, which, by the way, Americans don't like very much.
Yeah, Corinne, last sentence before we take a short break.
Yeah, the establishment won't choose a candidate. The primary voters will choose the candidate. So if Trump is winning the primary, he will certainly be the nominee. That is how it works.
Yeah, no doubt about that. All right, on that note, we're taking a very quick break, but when we get back, we continue our conversation and perhaps wonder whether it's not this or that candidate, whether it's the system that is failing Americans. A few minutes, and we're back. Welcome back to the summit. Still with us, Corinne Clark, Yigal Marcus, Marc Schulman. Thank you all very much for staying with us. We're also staying on topic, but before we get to our conversation, are Americans essentially forced to choose between the lesser of two evils? A new AP poll asked Americans what pops to mind when they hear the names of the leading presidential figures. Well, when hearing Biden, it's old, outdated, and confused. And what about Trump? Well, the buzzwords here: corrupt, dishonest. Well, I'm not sure nowadays whether these are words of scorn or endearment. But anyways, at most, will it be a compromised president of sorts? So let's get to it, dear panelists. Has the two-party system failed America? Another quick fire round, 30 seconds each, and we take it from there. Yigal Marcus, the floor is yours.
No, I don't think that it did. I think the Democratic Party has failed America. I think that when you have them dispatch the IRS to come after organizations that I care about, or the Department of Justice to come after people I care about, or come after the values that I care about, they have failed America. And that's not the Democratic Party of old. The Republicans have been pretty disciplined to what they believe in for many, 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 many years. Democrats have changed. You now have the extremist left taking over, becoming larger and larger and more vociferous in the party, and that has changed for the worst.
Marc Schulman.
I disagree in the sense that I won't get into what I think the Republican Party has changed, but I think there's a problem with the system. There's no question about that. A system that would possibly bring back Biden and bring back Trump is a system that's clearly broken. Incumbency is a problem. Trump is a problem in and of itself. and I don't know what the solution is. Part of the problem, of course, is the fact the primaries always get the most extremists to come out, and that's always a problem. So I think that's one of the issues that's a problem. It's also a problem in the Senate and Congress, is that the most extremists are the ones who end up electing senators in Congress, whether Democrat or Republican. So there are major changes that need to be taking place, and no one's really gotten a good roadmap for that.
Corinne Clark, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the problem is much bigger than a two-party system. It is actually the growing executive state that has become a problem. Our weaponized Department of Justice and out of touch and unaccountable intelligence community, and a national security apparatus that has more power than the commander-in-chief. I think that is a much deeper problem than a two-party system, and it is something we definitely have to address, and it's going to take a strong leader to do that.
All right.
Who said the Republican Party isn't changing, right? Republican Party stayed to its views, strong national security, strong intelligence community, defund the FBI. I mean, please, the Republican Party has changed almost more than the Democrats. We can hear that right now from the other guest. The fact that they're afraid of the intelligence community, such are people who dedicated their lives and generally tend to be relatively conservative in their political views. So the fact of the matter is there is a real set of problems, but I don't think those are the right ones. The real problems is a political system that cannot keep up with the times, not to mention the issue of social media and how that's affected politics, the fact that we're all getting news from different sources, the fact that we don't have a Walter Cronkite to tell us that's the way it was this day.
Excuse you, Marc Schulman. Just kidding.
I'm sorry, your audience isn't quite like Walter Cronkite.
Same 5 o'clock shade. Yigal Marcus.
Mark, what world do you live in? Have you not been reading the media? I mean, have you not been reading your media, actually? The reality is that, the Department of Justice has been weaponized. Yeah, we have special counsel being appointed in government, which is against the rules. So we've got much bigger problems. We are very big believers in national security, but when you weaponize the security apparatus against the people, when you weaponize the IRS, when you weaponize
all
the DOJ
those are wonderful talking
against
points.
its citizens,
Those are not the real
you've got
problems.
a bigger problem than that. That is a fundamental break in the trust between the people who elect the government and the government itself, and that has to change. So our values haven't changed. We want small government. We want the power to go back to the people in the states. We want lower taxes, less bureaucracy, and more freedom.
You want to go back to the
That hasn't changed. It hasn't changed since the days of Abraham Lincoln, and it will not change going forward.
You want to go back to the states, and yet many of your politicians are pushing for a national abortion ban because it went back to the states and they don't like the results. Please, it's whatever is opportunist is what they go for at this point. The reality is that the United States needs to find solutions to things like the tremendous income inequality that exists at the moment. But generally speaking, the economy is doing well. People are generally doing well. They're unhappy about a lot of things. And the biggest problem we have is that people get their news from such different sources. There's different facts, and people are living on different facts and not on the same base of information so they can make a decision. I'm not saying which facts are right or wrong,
the
but it's very different the facts they're reading.
Well. The economy
Excuse
is
me.
doing
Unemployment
well.
is low. Unemployment is low, and the GNP is growing.
Do you realize that the inflation tax of the Biden administration is
inflation is at 3%. Okay, it hasn't gone down to 2%.
Do you know what inflation does to poor people who don't have enough money in their bank accounts?
Excuse me, inflation is down to 3%. There was inflation everywhere in the world.
The Biden,
there was inflation. These are talking points. All you have is talking points.
Economy that has to be fixed, and the only way to fix it is by lowering our spending,
the GNP is growing, unemployment is low. What could be better than that?
Barriers and regulations for business. That's how you bring an economy back. And at the end of the day, we have got to eliminate this inflation tax that the Biden administration has given every single American, rich and poor.
That's a talking point. That is not a fact. It's a talking point. There's no fact to it. What inflation tax? There's no tax.
What inflation? You're right, Mark. You're right. What inflation?
Inflation is down to 3%. Right. It's not 2%. No, 3%.
It's good. No, just go to the election asking the question, what inflation? There's no inflation.
That's the reality. Look at numbers. I'm sorry. There's real numbers in the world.
Corinne, please. Yeah.
What's incredible here is that what triggered Mark on this absolutely delusional rant that started in one delusional place and wandered to a completely different delusional place is that I said we should have a national security apparatus that is accountable to the people. And that triggered a delusional rant about how our federal government is somehow super accountable to the people. Above all, Republicans should never be slaves to national security. We serve the Constitution, and our national security apparatus and our intelligence community and our Department of Justice should serve the Constitution.
What's your views on Ukraine, may I ask you?
Well
Do we
said,
continue
Corinne.
supporting Ukraine? I'm asking the young lady on the right. What's your views on Ukraine?
Why is that relevant to whether or not we hold our Department of Justice accountable to the people and our national
It's a question of national security. The Republican Party has been strong on national security, has been strong against Russia for 50 years, 75 years, and I want to know what your view at this moment is in terms of Russia and Ukraine.
Anyone, yeah.
Should be accountable to the people and should be subject to the restrictions of our Constitution. You're looking for a gotcha here, and all I'm saying is that
It's a reality of the changes that's gone on in the Republican Party. There's a significant part of the Republican Party that has become isolationist and is supporting Putin at this point, practically, in terms of Ukraine. That is a real problem.
No, they're supporting not writing unlimited checks to a government with no end game. And I think it's absolutely appropriate for us to say, okay, what is the end game here? We could write checks forever and ever and ever, and while we have places in our country that need money, like the southern border or like Maui, as an example, we're writing checks
I guarantee you Maui's going to get enough money, and the end game is victory over
asking
Russia.
for limits and some kind of plan is called proper planning. It's called responsibility.
You can't plan a war that's being fought by other people. No, it's giving into what Russia wants. It's hoping, Russia and Putin is hoping that the Republicans come to power and put the brakes on support for Ukraine.
All right, we're
Mark's
near.
official stance that accountability is un-American. It seems that's the official stance from Marc. Accountability, that's not democratic.
I believe in finding out what happens to every single dollar we give to Ukraine. Most of it has been in physical weapons. We haven't been giving them mostly money. It's mostly physical weapons out of U.S. stock, and then we're spending money to rebuild America's stock from what we've given the Ukrainians. And what are the Ukrainians doing with them? They're shooting and fighting at the Russians.
On ammunition to defend our own country.
Well, okay, but we're building it up. Right now, who's fighting the Russians?
We're
it's not the
building
United States, it's the Ukrainians.
It's going to take 10 years.
We got to improve on that. Absolutely, we got to improve on that. Are you suggesting we not give the Ukrainians and let the Russians win?
Where's the responsibility and accountability?
That's not the view of a Republican Party that I used to know.
Well,
that's for sure. And that's certainly not the view of Nikki Haley.
Well, I wonder if the presidential candidates will ever get to discuss those issues, or will it stay as it is, the mere optics of it all. On that note, Yigal Marcus, Corinne Clark, Marc Schulman, what a pleasure to have you back on the show. Thank you so very much, and we will see you around, right? The first date of the trial only in March 2024. We have plenty more to discuss until then. Thank you, lady, gentlemen, very much for this.
Hey, I see you liked it. Want more? Just hit the subscribe button right here. Go on. I know you want to.